If your job disappeared tomorrow, who would you be? Not what would you do next? Not how would you find work? Who would you be? For a lot of high performers, that question lands differently than expected. There's a pause, a little discomfort, maybe even a quiet panic. And that reaction, that is what I want to talk to you about today, because it's telling you something important. That feeling in that pause, that's identity collapse. And it's more common among high performers than anyone really talks about. Identity collapse isn't a breakdown. It's not dramatic. It's the slow destabilization that happens when a role you've built your life around changes or disappears. And suddenly, you don't quite know how to answer the question, who are you? Layoffs are the clearest example. On paper, a layoff is a business decision. Headcount, budget, restructuring. But internally, for a lot of people, it doesn't feel like a business decision. It feels like erasure. And the reason for that, the reason it hits so hard, is that somewhere along the way, the title stopped being something you had and became something you were. Here's how it happens. And it starts early. You work hard. You get results. Someone recognizes it. You feel valuable. So you work harder. You get more recognition, more reward. Your sense of value increases. And slowly, that becomes who you are. That loop isn't a flaw. It builds real competence, real confidence. But over time, your system starts to learn something it shouldn't. That your safety is tied to your output. Being needed feels stabilizing. Being high performing feels grounding. So when contribution pauses, whether that's a layoff, a sabbatical, a role change, or even just a slow quarter, your internal system doesn't just feel bored. It feels untethered. That's identity collapse starting to show up. The higher you perform, the more this trap tightens. Because high performers tend to carry more responsibility, define themselves by their reliability, feel most comfortable when they're solving problems, and build entire reputations around being the steady one. That identity feels strong. And in good conditions, it is. But strength inside a role isn't the same as stability beyond it. If your worth depends entirely on your output, then a missed target isn't just a setback. Criticism isn't just feedback. A layoff isn't just a transition. They become existential threats. Ambition isn't the issue. It's what happens when ambition is the only thing holding your identity together. When your identity is fused with your performance, a few things start to happen. Rest feels like a problem. Because if you're not producing, what are you? Feedback feels personal. Because it's not just about the work, it's about you. Career pivots feel like failure. Because moving sideways or stepping back reads as losing ground on the only scoreboard that matters. And burnout accelerates, not just because you're tired, but because you're not just protecting your performance anymore, you're protecting your sense of self. And that is exhausting in a way that sleep doesn't fix. So here's what I actually want you to do with all of this. Not a mindset shift, not a vague, remember you're more than your job, a specific exercise. This week, I want you to write down your answer to this question. Who am I outside of what I produce? Not your title, not your company, not your track record. Write down 3 things that are true about you that have nothing to do with your performance. Maybe it's how you show up for people, a way that you think about things, something you care about, a quality that existed before this job and will exist after it. 3 things written down. That's it. Because identity doesn't expand through insight alone. It expands through deliberate attention, through consciously practicing the answer to that question until it becomes as natural as rattling off your job title. You can be someone who achieves and someone who exists fully beyond their achievements. That's not a reduction of ambition. That's what makes ambition sustainable. If the opening question, who would you be without your job, felt uncomfortable, I want you to hold on to that feeling, not as a warning, as information. Discomfort there means identity work is available to you. And that work is worth doing. Not instead of performing well, but alongside it. Write down those 3 things. Keep them somewhere you'll see them. That's where you start.